This is the Brella Community Services Podcast with Michael Morgan and Raj Sahota, talking about the I'm Still Me project, a support talk about dementia.
Hello, this is the Brella Podcast number 4, and we have had some extraordinary adventures on this podcast. My co-host is Raj Sahota. Raj, for those who haven't seen the podcast before, I wonder if you could explain your duties with Brella and a little bit about what Brella does so that people are up to speed and they know why Brella has this podcast and how valuable it is to the people with dementia. So tell us about you.
You got it, Michael. My name is Raj Sahota. I am the manager of day programs for South Surrey. And I'm also the research and evaluation coordinator for the I'm Still Me project, which is funded through the Public Health Agency of Canada. And its main goal and aim is to help raise awareness around dementia and the stigma that is surrounding it.
So it's also, you have been personally going out into the community as part of this campaign. What are you finding in the community as you go and present the resources and make yourself available? What's the reception been of the people there?
The reception has been phenomenal. We are going to be hit by what has been called the silver tsunami. It's going to hit us very soon. People are unaware of its coming. So we're pretty much trying to bring awareness around it. We are out in the community talking about dementia. We're trying to reduce the stigma around it, trying to normalize it. We're trying to bring real life stories of not just the people that are living with dementia, but also their caregivers. So the struggles that people are seeing, we're trying to create communities where they support each other and one another and create compassionate spaces and safe spaces for people to share this, just share.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we've been sharing since the first podcast. We've been bringing people on who have hands-on experience as not necessarily trained caregivers, but people dealing with people that they love with dementia. And I think it's a very good time, and I'm thrilled to introduce our next guest, George and Stephanie Mathis. George is what they used to call a wunderkind. Everybody in the community know him. He was in the restaurant industry. He is a bon vivant. He used to gather with the glitterati of his day, and he's widely respected and universally loved. And to join him today is his daughter Stephanie. And the reason why we've asked them to come on is that they are dealing every day with a loved one who has dementia. And there's nothing like talking to people who are dealing with it, because all the professionals in the world can help, but there's nothing like firsthand experience, as we found with Roger Hope. So Stephanie and George, I want to say good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us.
The symbol behind you, thanks for being on. The symbol behind you is perfect because this is International Women's Day. And even though this podcast will be available long past this date, it's good to remember that that day exists and we are honoring women around the world today. George, tell me about Daphne, your wife.
She's the loveliest person you're ever gonna meet, and such a gentle lady. And we've been together for 53 years, and I just love her like nothing else. And it's very sad what has happened to her, but I'm doing the best I can to keep her normal, and we still go out and
George, when was it that you first noticed that things were not as usual with Daphne?
About 8 years ago, we were babysitting our daughter Melanie's 2 kids while she worked, and noticed that she was very frustrated with the babysitting chores and stuff like that. And so finally, I had to tell our daughter that we couldn't do it anymore. And it slowly went downhill after that, to the point where now she doesn't recognize anything or anybody. I have to walk her through everything, what clothes to wear, and go into the bathroom and brush her teeth or put some curl in her hair. Everything is now, up to me to get her to do it.
Stephanie, I'm sorry, George, I didn't mean to interrupt. In continuing your thought, what kind of a toll does that take on you? Because this means that you are pretty much 24/7 hands-on.
I don't really know that it's taken a toll on me because, I've always, all my life, I've handled everything with a sort of a comedic approach. And so, uh, I've had experience with it before. My mother-in-law had dementia, and then my very good friend Basil, who we basically looked after until he passed away. I've had experience with it and just dealt with it with a sense of humor rather than be sad that it happened to me.
Well, that's a God gift. Humor gets us through almost everything. I'm not afraid to dip in that well when times are tough. I want to come back and talk a little bit about your years with Basil, but Stephanie, that's your mom we're talking about. Tell me what you very first noticed when. Did you deny it? Did you turn away? Did you share that? I mean, you saw it slipping.
So when I first noticed it, I brought it up with both my parents, and it was not met very well. Like my mom in particular didn't want to talk about it and didn't want to acknowledge it, wanted to actually, I remember at one point she had told us, that's it. Actually, Dad had to come and tell us, Mom doesn't want to talk about it. She doesn't want to acknowledge it. That's it. No more conversation about it, which is frustrating because you know that if you see it at the beginning and you get on the proper medication right away, then you can sort of slow it down. I know that you can't stop it, but you can slow it down. So that was a little bit frustrating, but we had to respect her wishes. It's her body, and she's, as long as she could articulate what she wanted. And now, of course, we've moved past that. She is on medication, and that does help to slow it down. But sometimes you wonder, if you can start it right away. But I can't imagine being in that situation, how frustrating it must be to start losing your autonomy and not, being able to. I mean, how afraid you must feel when you go to make a decision and then you're stopped in your tracks. Like, wait a second, I don't even know which direction to take my thoughts. She just gets stopped. So it's frustrating. It's
This is a
frustrating.
good time to bring in Raj, because Raj deals, that's your mom and that's your singular focus. Although, as George says, he has a bit of history and we'll go back on that. But Raj, you deal with this all the time. Explain what advice do you give and how do you advise people whose loved ones are slipping and they simply don't want to acknowledge it?
A lot of the times it just comes down to that the person does have choice. And it's scary. It's scary knowing that diagnoses, and a lot of people are aware of what the future entails. So majority of the time, what they're trying to do is they're trying to either shy away from it or hide away from it, or, like Stephanie had said, her mom didn't want to talk about it anymore, and that was it. And as caregivers, we do our very best to try to do what is best for our loved ones, but we need to remember that, at the end of the day, they do have choice and they're still able to make those choices. So that was her decision, and we need to be respectful of it. It is a very difficult decision, and it's a very difficult pill for us to swallow because we want the very best for them. The most we can do at this point is love and patience.
Mhm.
Well, the name of the campaign, Stephanie and George, that Brella is involved in and has been since November, is called I'm Still Me. How does that resonate with you? Do you understand the intrinsic meaning of I'm Still Me? Stephanie, we'll go with you first.
I have goosebumps hearing that. That actually, completely resonates with me, because that's something that I hear my mom saying, like, and I want to say it for her too. Like, she's still her, and I still see that too. And we tried to be the thing that has been really helpful for us is a bit of a meditation about being present with my mom. So we don't look too far ahead and we don't look too far back. We try to stay in the moment, which is actually beneficial for all of us in our lives. And so it's been such a gift to have that before us, to stay in the present moment. So when we're with my mom, we laugh, we make jokes, we giggle, and then I see that she's still her. There are moments of lucidity where, like, it's evident, oh yeah, that's my mom. And also my mom has changed, and I also enjoy that new person that she is as well. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is realizing that as we become caregivers, our roles change. So my mom is not necessarily, she's not a parent to me anymore, and I'm not really her daughter. I am a caregiver, but I'm also a friend. I'm an ally. I'm a person to escape with, and we're really good friends. Like, we just have a friendship, and she feels safe with me. So that joy is something that I am so grateful for. And that's her now. That's the new person she is. That's some of the person she was before. And we all
I want to
evolve.
get to, yes, I want to get to you, George, in a minute. I wanted to reflect, Raj, that's a very articulate description of the entire campaign, I'm Still Me. Did you want to make a comment on Stephanie's reflection?
This exactly was the reason why we chose I'm Still Me, because at the end of the day, that person is still them. They're just themselves with a dementia diagnosis. So it's no different than having diabetes or being diagnosed with anything else. At the end of the day, it's still them. So, it's about bringing awareness to the fact that having a dementia diagnosis does not change that person, or it doesn't become the center of attention or their life. It's, their life is still theirs. It just has to be modified. Processing time takes a little bit longer. Personality changes happen. Behavioral changes happen. Things do change, but at the end of the day, they are still them. And that's something that we need to remember.
We'll go to George. George, you told me when we first spoke that you take Daphne out, you said walking on a fairly regular basis.
Every
How
day.
do every day? How long do you walk for?
We've walked up to 32 kilometers in a day. That's
Good
like
gracious.
not in one walk, 2 or 3 a day, because that's her, I guess, feeling of still being around. She loves walking, and because we've been such fixtures in like Kitsilano, we run into 3, 4, 5 people a day that we know. And so that helps her, kind of connect with reality. And she enjoys walking. The other thing she enjoys is music. So we try to get out as often as we can to music venues. And most of the places we go to, we know the singers or the bands. So she gets a feeling of being out there and being part of the party, kind of.
That's wonderful. George, you said to me, and I want to be careful because we're talking about people who aren't here anymore, but um, you hung with the movers and the groovers in your day. And you're not that old. I hung with the movers and groovers in my day, but your stories were people who were legendary characters, and one of them was Basil. And you told an incredible story to me, and I'm hoping you might repeat it, about how you saw Basil, um, starting to slip well beyond anybody else, and none of his family were willing to acknowledge nor join in supporting it. Tell me how that happened and where.
Well, we spent a lot of time with Basil. We were out with them 2 or 3 times, maybe 4 times a week, and we traveled. We went to Hawaii with them, and So we saw him more than his family did. And I was like family. I was like he was like an older brother to me. And so the thing was, they didn't see him that often and they didn't realize it. But it took me a while to convince the family, especially his brother George, who was his caregiver at the time. And finally, after telling him that I was the one that got all the calls at 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And if I couldn't bring him down to normal, Daphne and I get in our car and drive over to the West End there and look after him.
This
And
was Basil Pantages, a rather famous man
yes,
in his day,
yes. And then
known
we
for the
put him in a
theaters and the
home. We
entertainment.
visited him.
Yeah. So you had experience at that. Stephanie, you're a young woman with a mom who has dementia. Uh, when your girlfriends get together and you decide like to have a night out or what have you, I guess they all know, but how do they inquire as to how she's doing without dragging you into the vortex of how she's doing? How do you deal with your friends and this knowledge?
So I am asked that question quite a bit, and sometimes it has a negative spin on it. And I usually like to turn that around because it's not necessarily, you don't have to look at it in a negative light. It's just a change in our situation, and we rise to the occasion and we take care of my mom, and she's taken care of us all these years. It's not a burden. And we don't look at it that way because of how we roll into it. Like we just have fun. Nothing changes. We just have a responsibility to make sure she has the right kind of care. So when friends ask, like, how's your mom? I'm like, she is doing great, actually. Most often, it's my dad that I'm more concerned about. So I think it's the caregivers, and just making sure that they're that they're taken care of, that their health is being looked after, they're getting enough sleep, and they're asking for help. So it's important that I take my mom at least once a week or twice a week, and my sister can also do the same, or sometimes we team up. That's important because at first my dad sort of dug his heels in about that. He needs that time too. He needs to go for a massage or run his errands or just take a walk on his own and get some fresh air. I think if you've had children, you know that it's a full-time job being with kids, and there's always questions and making sure that they're okay. And when we go to our jobs, it's a bit of a relief to be around other people that we can have more meaningful conversations with and connect that way. Not that the conversations aren't meaningful with my mom, they are. However, it gets more and more difficult to be able to have a constructive conversation where, sometimes you just need to talk about what's going on, and that would be difficult with my mom. So that's important that my dad gets time.
Yeah. So you're caregiving for two in a way, Stephanie.
Not really. My dad would not allow me to caregive for him, but he just needs to be told to go and take the time on his own and get his appointments taken care of. If he wants to pick up groceries, if he wants to have a nap, sometimes my mom's trying to escape at night, and those nights my dad is tired.
Yeah, of course, on alert.
Yeah, so that doesn't happen very often, but there's times where she's wandering around and that makes it difficult to get rest. So
well, George was talking about the sundown. And how things begin to change when the sun sets. And George, that's when things get restless. Is that correct?
Very much so. And it's worse in the wintertime because it starts at like 5 o'clock in the evening, where in the summertime she's fine till about 10 or 10:30. So I have to deal with it in different ways and come up with novel things to say and do with her. But the thing with me is Stephanie was talking about me not needing help. I retired 30 years ago when our first grandchild was born. And so we've been together 24/7s for the last 30 years. So I don't find it a burden. We've always gotten along. We've never, in the 53 years we've been married, we've never had any major fights or anything like that. It's been smooth sailing, and that's why
Part of
I
the
ask for
road.
help.
Yeah, that's a remarkable story. I want to throw to Raj again. Raj, you're out now in the community and you're talking to people. And are you seeing any sense that folks are beginning to realize that this thing, dementia, is, as you called it, the silver tsunami, and it is a crisis and it needs dealing with? Could you comment on what you're picking up from people?
So when I state the stats that were out in 2020 and the newer versions of 2023, people are generally flabbergasted. Nobody really knows that we have over 600,000 diagnosed cases of dementia within the 65 plus population of Canadians. Every hour, 15 new cases are diagnosed. That's every single hour. And that number will only increase as time goes on. So, with that information, it starts to hit a little closer to home. I'm also finding that more people are becoming more aware of what dementia is and the signs and symptoms to look out for. So, there's things such as normal aging versus the early signs of dementia. Bringing that to people's attentions really starts to kind of hit home because majority of the time it gets brushed off as, oh, I'm 70, that's just normal. Or, it's this is what always happened. This is how my mom was, so it's genetics. This is how I am. So people are really starting to kind of understand that, hey, maybe this isn't normal aging and I should talk to my doctor about what's happening.
Do you find that there is any difference in the cultural people that of different cultures that you run into when you're out and about, and their acceptance and how they deal with it? Is there a difference between someone who is South Asian and someone who may be from the Bahamas? I mean, or Asian? Is there any difference in the way this is being protected by the community and dealt with?
There's the major difference that I'm finding is that there's the Western culture and the Eastern culture difference, where the Eastern culture, the grandparents generally stay at home longer, or the children stay with the parents. So they have the internal community that's built. And then because they're immigrants from the East, they like to stay in within their own community as well. So they congregate at the local temples and the churches and community centers, and they all speak the same language. So they all kind of look out for each other. And it's kind of built into them that, our grandparents helped us take our first steps. So it's our duty to help them take their last. So you'll find that we try to keep them at home for as long as possible. And we'll rearrange our schedules, whether it's work and school, and work with the parents and the children to make sure that the grandparents feel safe. Um, that's the one big difference I'm finding. The other one is that in the Western culture, we live more in silos. So you don't generally, apart from your direct neighbors, you don't really know who else kind of lives in your neighborhood. And that's something that in the Eastern culture is unheard of. You kind of know everyone around you.
Yeah.
So everyone's kind of looking out for each other. I'm finding that now it's happening a little bit more here in Canada as well. We're all looking out for our neighbors. We're all keeping an eye out for everyone else, especially since the pandemic. The mandate was that it's sheltering at home, but it's to keep an eye out for each other. So I feel like that's one good thing that came out from the pandemic itself, apart from the social isolation, which kind of added to the dementia pandemic. But we grew closer to our neighbors. We know who's living where, we know who lives alone, we know who needs an extra hand, and it's just keeping an eye out for each other. One of my coworkers actually um, called in to do a wellness check because she hadn't seen one of her elderly neighbors. And as she knocked on the door, nobody answered. They found out that he actually had a heart attack the night before.
Oh dear.
So had she not, went over and checked and said, "Hey, I haven't seen this person in a few days. I don't know what's happening." Who knows how long it would have been before somebody realized.
Wow, that's almost too serendipitous. So, is Louise near you? Can you,
No,
she's
unfortunately,
not.
she's not.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about, um, this is expensive to reach out and touch people and get into the community, make yourself available, try to be the force of good and healing and understanding. Are there ways that the people who are watching this could donate to what Brella's doing? Because there isn't endless funding for this.
Yes. So you can go onto our website to www.brellasociety.ca and hit the donate now button. We are a nonprofit and a charitable foundation. So you can file it in your taxes at the end of this year. But yes, hit up our website, www.brellasociety.ca, and press the donate now button.
All right. Stephanie and George, are there ever moments when all of this, it's now 8 years that Daphne has been suffering, or not suffering, but with dementia. Is there any part that's still sad for you?
Well, I find it sad that all her friends um, don't you don't partake in what's going on. We get together, she sits around, and I try to include her in the conversation, and I know she doesn't know anything about it, but I say, do you remember that? And she'll go, oh, yes, yes. But her friends sort of don't include her in the conversations because there's nothing there. She has no memory of any of that stuff, and that kind of bothers me a little bit. But otherwise, I do my best to keep her in the loop of a bunch of friends. And I started just around COVID. I started a dinner party about every 5 or 6 weeks, where we go to a Greek restaurant at Broadway and Trutch. And I invite 20 or 30 people. And if it's somebody's birthday, I pick up a birthday cake. And it was 2 Sundays ago, it was Daphne's birthday, and she loved it. And so, I try to get her to socialize as much as she can, or her mind will let her, just to keep things as normal as I possibly can for her and for myself.
Stephanie, for you, you're now fully engaged in your mom's life in this new world. What reflections can you give those people who are watching? The whole notion of dementia, I think at the heart of it, is terrifying to people. To have deleted the major memories of your life, your accomplishments, to the point where you could barely recognize your loved ones. Um, what is your thought on how that can be dealt with by caregivers and families? I mean, are you terrified by that, or do you just take it day for day,
I'm
moment for
not
moment?
terrified. I think that it can be terrifying for some members and friends that don't know what to say or how to approach it. And there's really no right or wrong answer. Just treat them like you would any other person. One important question to stay away from, in my opinion, is, do you remember? It's futile and it's frustrating for them. And it's only, I think, serving it's only to serve you to do you remember, and I think we get used to saying that too, just it just becomes second nature to say, do you remember this time. um I think it's, again, goes back to being present. And so just staying present and talking about how much fun we're having now. And do you want to dance? Do you want to sing? Those kinds of things bring them right into the present. I have a granddaughter now. They have a great granddaughter. So we have the granddaughter around, and we realize that that keeps my mom really present. Pets, animals. My mom loves to stop and pet dogs when we're on walks. Now I digress because I'm going into what is actually helpful, but helpful is all the walking they do. My mom is so physically active. She can take a hill and not be breathless. Things that I noticed, alcohol exacerbates Alzheimer's and dementia. Every time my mom would have a couple drinks of alcohol, I noticed that her memory got worse.
Wow.
And I just only took a couple. I actually noticed it for myself too, and the things that I'm doing to stay, with that being in mind, that my grandmother had Alzheimer's and that my mom has Alzheimer's. And I also cared for Basil.
Did you?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I
over
didn't realize.
COVID, I
I just
was his main caregiver that came to the hospital to visit him all during the week, 4 or 5 times a week. But getting back to eating right, being healthy, exercising, building muscle, being social. And that means going out and doing things like buying groceries, going to the bank, talking to people, seeing your friends, having meaningful conversations, again, being present. Those are things that I notice are helpful for me and strengthen my brain and stretch my mind. So
Also treating them normal. I treat Daphne like she's still the normal person that I married. And the other thing she really enjoys is I tell her maybe a dozen times a day how much I love her, and we hug.
wonderful.
And every night before we go to bed, we have a big hug, and she tells me that I'm her one and only, and she loves me, and I do the same. And, all that stuff, really helps me just as much as it helps her.
In closing of this podcast, you both have been remarkable. I mean, and I say that because, as Raj alluded to, and we'll close with Raj in a second, but before we leave you too, if it's every 15 minutes that someone is diagnosed with dementia and or Alzheimer's, that means that as we're speaking, somebody has received some bad news. They may sense, but it doesn't have to be a death sentence. It doesn't mean the end of good food, good laugh, good love, good communication. I mean, there is hope even after the diagnosis. Would you agree with that, both of you?
Absolutely.
yeah, and I want to say too about building the trust piece of it. Like, I think when my dad reminds my mom constantly that he loves her and she's in good care and that we wouldn't do anything to hurt her or leave her in any harm, it's building this trust. It's like what you do, how you grow a proper human being when you have a child in your care. And it's the same when you have somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's. You want to always make sure that they know that they're cared for and loved and they feel it. It's a feeling. So we do that as much as possible.
Absolutely.
So it's not the end of the world when you get that diagnosis. It's the beginning of a new world.
Totally. Yeah, it's a beautiful world. Like, I really enjoy the time that I have with my mom. It's a new experience. And she's so funny and so beautiful and so bright that this is just an incarnation of my mother's spirit. And I think we both, like, I get something from it.
Her consciousness is rising.
Mm-hmm.
That's something to speak of at another time. I want to thank you both. I want to go to Raj again. Raj, I'd like to close with you and any thoughts or questions you may have for George and Stephanie, two incredible people to have on the show. Raj, the world is rapidly evolving and you're in the center of it. You're a young woman fighting a huge battle. How can you be helped?
How can I be helped?
You're in the trenches.
I am in the trenches.
you're
I
against
do.
denial.
I do. I need everyone coming out to all of the events, showing their support. We are a nonprofit organization, and helping us by donating and going and visiting our website, again, www.brellasociety.ca, and hitting that donate button now would be a great deal of help. We are completely run on grants and fundraising. So we need everyone's help to continue doing the good work that we're doing out here in the community. We're trying to do the best that we can with all the resources that are out there and trying to keep everyone as safe at home as possible and aging as safely as possible.
That's certainly a goal that's well worth all of us fighting for, because as you say, this is coming. It's a high tide, and
Yes, it is.
it won't necessarily rise all ships. Raj, you're a great co-host as always. I want to flip back to George and Stephanie. Once again, thank them and then wish you all a very good day. Keep up the good work. Thanks for shining the light that
This is my
inflames
rock
and
here.
illuminates our spirit. You're a pair. I love you both.
Love you.
Love you too.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so
Thanks
much for
for
being on
having
the
us.
show. Oh,
Thank
it's
you.
a thrill. Thanks for sharing your story. And we'll talk again. Thank you.
Very good.
Goodbye, Raj.
Bye.
Bye.
This was the Brella Community Services Society podcast with Michael Morgan and Raj Sahota. For more information, go to our website at www.brellasociety.ca.